I've got a treat for you today. This was sent to me by a family member, and this is about as bad as a knife can get. This is a very old Masakage Yuki. We've got quite a lot of extended damage on this. The whole collar of the handle has fallen off. I know it doesn't go through the dishwasher, but it is kind of like loose floating in a drawer. We have barely any core steel left. That edge is basically scalloped at this point. But it's been a while since I've done a restoration myself. I'm not in the stores sharpening regularly as much as I used to. So we're gonna go for a little adventure, see how it goes. And if we need help, Naoto's here along the way. Okay, so step number one is gonna be reprofiling the edge, which is currently kind of in a scalloped situation, because it's been repeatedly drug over a steel honing rod, which has been eating away the core steel, in addition to the acids that have been hanging out on it. So we have basically no core steel left. And if this is your first time kind of tuning in, or if you're not familiar with how Japanese knives are constructed, a lot of them are made with a layer style called sanmai. So there's one harder steel in the middle, and then two pieces of softer steel on the outside. So it stays strong, but also holds an edge for a really long time. All right, I have attempted to secure the handle with varied results. Now we're gonna get started. I'm gonna use a pretty high angle at the very start because we have a lot of steel to get through. To be honest with you guys, this is pretty highly experimental because there is a lot of corrosion on this core steel. So it very well may be that we don't have a lot of steel to work with anymore, and I might have to take off quite a bit.
Get over here.
So for all that this knife has been through, it actually kind of maintained the same profile. Like, it's wavy on a smaller level, but there's no like huge dips from a honing rod. The only thing that was kind of left over was just a little bit of a snub nose where there was a little bit more pressure on that honing rod. But that'll come right out with the sharpening. When I'm repairing a lot of edge damage, I like to kind of work on both sides and flip-flop so that I'm wearing the steel at a pretty even rate. And then when I'm ready to put on the final edge before I start thinning out the knife, then I stay on one side, do it completely, flip to the other side, do it completely. All right. We are almost all the way through the corrosion. So far, so good. No high spots. I'm just gonna keep on keeping on. Right there. Oh shit, it is bent. So I've got two problems. I've got more corrosion right in the center of the blade that's pitted underneath the cladding, and the tip is just a little bit bent, which is making my blade road a little uneven. So what that'll probably translate into is just maybe a little bit less even finish in that area. So I'm gonna see if I can kind of bend that back a little bit, and then we'll come back to the wheel.
Can you give me corrosion and bent again?
Corrosion. Cladding, bent. So it's a little shallower on this side, and then wider on this side, which tells me that there's a warp in the blade. Just a little wiggle. The first time I corrected a bend in a knife, the guy training me, Connor, I was like, have you ever snapped a knife before? No, I literally have never snapped a knife. And it was like It was like a IKEA something or other. So I was like, oh, okay. And I snapped like 2 inches of the tip off, like it was in half. Connor's like, did that just break? Yeah.
Have you snapped the tip since?
No, God. I've been so careful ever since. And now I feel like I have a pretty good idea of like how much a knife can take. And then the thing that you can do, but you're not supposed to, is like kind of putting your hand on it and just kind of giving a little wiggle on the counter. But I think that's about as good as it's gonna get. All right. So most of my edge is all cleaned up. We've got a new profile, we've got a blade road to follow when we start thinning it out. There's just a little bit left of the old patina here, but that'll come out as I start to thin it, which is probably gonna take quite a while. The last thing I'm gonna do before I move on with this knife is I'm gonna work just a little bit on the spine here, because there is a little bit of pitting. The core steel has kind of left like a little groove, and I'm just gonna bring it down to meet the point a little bit better. So now that we've removed all of the corroded steel from the edge, this is super thick. And one of the things that makes a knife cut really well is how thin it is. So it's time to start grinding from the whole side of the blade, this entire section along here, which will improve the geometry, it'll make it cut a lot better. And then once we've removed most of that steel, I'm gonna take it to some stones to polish it up, and then we'll be as good as new. Okay, now we're gonna start hot rodding. We're gonna be here a while.
Yeah.
One thing I do appreciate about Yuki's is they do grind relatively fast. There are definitely harder knives to sharpen. She lives! Alright, we can see that little bit of cladding line. That's the heart of your knife, and she's gonna be okay. But about this much steel, which I've ground here, I have to do that on the whole knife. And then I have to do it on the entire other side. The wire handle is like soggy.
Oh.
Okay, so I just finished up on the green wheel, and I think overall it went pretty good. It's been a while since I was hot rodding on this wheel, but everything came out okay. We're looking pretty smooth and clean and nice and thin now. I am leaving it like just a tad thicker, like just a smidge, because I know where this knife is going, and I'd like to give it as much like beefiness as I can to prepare for returning to its new home.
Best chance for survival.
Yeah, the best chance for survival this knife can have. The little kind of bend in the tip went pretty well. I got a little bit of a higher spot on the cladding line on one side, which just means that there is still a bit of a bend, but I tried to compensate and leave it a little bit thicker on the other side. So I couldn't fully get rid of it, but for the purposes of today, it's doing great. Okay, so now I'm gonna switch over to the pink wheel. Which is a lot finer grit and is gonna polish out the scratches that I made from moving so much steel on the green wheel. And for reference, the green wheel is 180 grit, which when it's spinning is kind of the equivalent of a 220, just like the stones we've got. And this one is about 800 grit, and when it spins, it's about the equivalent of a 1000 stone, which is great for polishing, and I'll probably go to one of those once I'm done here too. It's important to make sure your stone is nice and flat so we get an even finish, and it also maintains the life of your stone. These are expensive, you want them to last a long time. So I'm like okay on the pink wheel, but I'm gonna be fixing a lot of stuff with stones after this, and it's basically just the sharpening version of fix it in post. The idea here is mostly just to get the majority of the scratches polished away. And I'm more concerned with doing a thorough job rather than a quick job. Well, she ain't perfect, but she looking good. Good enough. Apologies to all the sharpening nerds that like to hear the stones. My audio got corrupted, so here we are. So now that I'm finished on the wheels, we're moving on to whetstones. I did pretty alright on the pink wheel, but here I'm using the Naniwa Hibiki 1000 grit to create a foggier finish on the bevel, which hides some of the unevenness. Here you can see my progress. You can see where I've kind of blurred my mistakes and what I still have to clean up. This is part of that bend near the edge, and I'll need to put more pressure near the spine of the knife to get this finish up higher. Here you can really see the contrast between the shiny edge and the foggy finish that I've been creating, and right where my finger is, you can see that there's still just a little bit of shine left over from the pink wheel, so I'll need to put a little bit more pressure on the spine. Now that this side is sufficiently foggy enough, I can start on the second side. Some people like to do the second side by flipping the knife away from them, but at this point I like to switch hands simply because it feels intuitive for me. There isn't really a right or wrong way to do this, but it's just whatever feels right to you. Alright, we do a quick inspection here, and now that I've finished on this stone and erased all my mistakes, I can flatten my stone and the edges so they don't cut now till next time he picks it up. Now I'm going in with some 400 grit sandpaper. This finish is evening the primary bevel I've created, and I'm not too concerned with keeping a fancy high contrast Kasumi style finish right now, so a clean look will work. Because there are so many scratches from the use of this knife, I'm also taking the sandpaper up onto the back bevel of the knife, along the whole blade, and all this does is make sure it evens out. And there you go, our thinning is complete. Now we can start to focus on the final edge. I'm starting on the Knifewear 1000 grit stone, and then followed by the Naniwa Hibiki 3000 to put a micro bevel on my newly thinned knife. This time I do flip the knife around. I tend to switch hands when thinning a knife, but when putting on the final edge, just feels right to swap. Doing a pre-strop on the stones saves time when I'm finishing up the bevel. I'll give it a wipe and strop my knife on a piece of suede loaded with chromium oxide, which is a polishing agent that helps pull off any remaining burr. Then we're on to testing the knife, and it looks like I'm happy enough with how I did, so we're on to removing the handle.
All right, handle's off. I'm just gonna clean off the tang a little bit. There's a little bit of rust, but they do make these with a stainless tang. Yeah. All right, handle's off. I'm gonna go get some supplies and then we're gonna get a new one on this guy.
I've burned a new hole into the handle, and it's time to use little teensy tiny pieces of glue. So I'm just gonna take a small handful of these guys, and then I'm gonna put them right inside the little hole of the handle. And this is gonna be the resin that keeps the tang in there. So it's not just friction set, but it is fully epoxied in there. Okay. Now we can heat the tang one more time. Pretty good. I'm gonna let that guy cool off. Many hours and a new handle later, we've got our finished project. Please ignore my super sharpening hands. And for reference, here's the old one, and here is what a new Yuki looks like. I'd say I'm not too far off. Like, it ain't perfect, but you know, it's a hell of a lot better than it was. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm pretty proud of this. So this is a pretty extreme case, but if you want to prevent this from happening to your knife, you want to make sure that you're not using a steel honing rod, which can chip up the edge. You want to make sure that if something is getting on that shiny core steel, that you want to wipe that off pretty quickly, because this one in particular has a carbon core, which can rust, can erode, and that's definitely what happened with this. But you can see it's got some scars. So if your knife looks anything like this one, don't be embarrassed. Just bring it into one of our shops or send it in to us here at the warehouse. We can fix it. We can make it whole again. Hope you enjoyed this. It was fun hanging out. And if you want to see more videos like this, you can check out our sharpening playlist, and we'll see you around. Mr. Nathan.
Yep.
Don't jump down if you're holding many thousands of dollars of equipment. But like...
You have a lot of fun watching this footage.